so many people.
Hello, psychology class. This lecture is for you. Actually, this is not a lecture. This is more of a Mork for Mork kind of space age engagement party. I'm just kidding. What I thought I would do today is bring you a what is and how to video about neural communication, or how brain cells talk to one another. If you're reading chapter 3 in your textbook, you've probably already stumbled upon the Latin that is brain communication. And if you're like most students, at least speaking for myself when I was in college, I either skipped those sections that talked about the brain or just kind of scratched my head and read through them as quickly as possible, never really understanding any of it. I mean, after all, who could be blamed for not understanding? Who could be blamed for being bored by a technical term like neuron? What I'm going to try to do today is to make the brain, specifically brain cell communication, make sense to you. Everything you think, everything you do, everything you feel, all of your hopes, all of your dreams, everything you've ever wanted or wished for is collected inside this enigmatic, fleshy black box. We've already talked about the characteristics of the human brain at the macro level. In other words, we've talked about the human brain at 30,000 feet, right? If we're in a helicopter looking down on a human, we can see the big parts of that person. What I want to do today is pretend that we're going on a microscopic journey inside the human brain so that we can better understand how our brain talks to itself and how it talks to the rest of our body. And at the most fundamental level, we have brain cells, also called neurons. There are about 100 billion, that's with a B, neurons in the human brain. And they're not just in the human brain. They're actually located throughout the brain, spinal cord, and the entire body, connected to everything inside your body. They travel from your brain to the tips of your toes, along networks, arranged much like the interwebs or internet, communicating both to and fro in a spider web of chaotic activity. These 100 billion brain cells make you, you. Now, how is it that they're both in the brain and outside the body? And if they're outside the body, outside the brain, how is it that they still maintain the name brain cell? Well, that's easy. Brain cells are made up of parts or components. What I'm going to do is attempt to draw these components for you so that we get a basic understanding of the structure of a single brain cell. The first part we want to draw is what's called the soma. Soma. And the soma is really just a body part of a brain cell. So if you look under a microscope, a soma, any body part of a brain cell will look much like the image I've prepared for you on the screen. Now, this soma is where multiple things happen. Number one, this soma is where metabolic activity happens, right? The energy that you are storing and the energy with which you animate the human brain is happening thanks to this soma. Also inside this soma are neurochemicals. You guys have heard of dopamine, serotonin, the feel-good chemical, adrenaline or norepinephrine. You've heard of acetylcholine. Well, this is exactly where these chemicals, this pharmacy inside your head, builds these neurochemicals inside the soma. And a third thing I want you to know about the soma is that the soma is home to the nucleus. That's right, like every cell, at least every eukaryotic cell, like humans, the soma is not the only part of the neuron, right? Brain cells also have long protruding tubes. These long protruding tubes are called axons. Axons. Axons are long and tubular. What are axons for? They allow electrochemical activity. They allow brain signals to move within and between brain cells, traveling just micrometers from one brain area to another, all the way to 6.5 feet in the case of my brain down to my toes. Remember earlier I said that brain cells can be found all throughout the body. Brain cells are found all throughout the body because these components connect parts of brain cells to other parts of brain cells, or parts of brain cells to other organs or other tissues or tendons. These axons can be, again, micrometers long, or these axons can be 6.5 feet long in the case of my motor axons from the tippy top of my brain all the way to my toes. Axons come in all shapes and sizes, but normally speaking, most brain cells, most of those 100 billion brain cells have one axon. Now, if axons provide the conduit through which electrochemical activity is transmitted, the question is, how does the chemical energy, how does the electrochemical activity ever enter the brain cell? If you've ever grown vegetables or seen vegetables pulled from the garden, like a carrot or onion, you know the little whiskers, the little spiny things called roots that have all the dirt around them. They perform a similar function as does the dendrites in the human brain. Dendrites receive the electrochemical activity. Dendrites are receiving messages from other parts of the body as well as other brain areas. These dendrites are numerous. Some brain cells have a couple of hundred, some brain cells have a couple of thousand. The dendrites are really what allows brain cells to connect, to communicate, to interact with one another. If you've ever heard someone say, well, music or good nutrition or exercise or intellectual activities stimulate the brains of, enter anyone you want, the elderly, a teenager, a young person, someone not born yet. What they're talking about is these little dendrites, these little spiny roots. You see, they emerge and grow and develop under the influence of a variety of stimulations. These stimulations, again, can be music, they can be nutrition, they can be intellectual challenges, but they grow and develop under the influence of stimuli. Now, you may have also heard due to aging, just simply, that's right, being alive can cause your brain cells to shrivel or to sort of back up. This is actually not a bad thing necessarily. It's actually a pretty good thing. Contrary to popular belief, it isn't the number of dendrites you have that makes you intelligent, that gives you reasoning ability. It's how they're connected. It's the quality of their connections. So the process by which, as you get older, dendrites get trimmed or atrophy is actually a good thing. Some neuroscientists refer to this as neuropruning. Now, incoming electrochemical signals enter this brain cell, specifically the soma, through the dendrites, through these dendrites. The signal is transmitted under the right circumstances that we'll talk about later through this axon. But where does it go when it reaches the end of the axon? Where does this signal go? Well, the last thing I want you to know is these little bulbs, these little knobs at the very end of the axon, known as Axon Terminals. Sometimes called terminal buttons, sometimes called presynaptic knobs, but it's fine if you want to think about Axon Terminals. Terminal being the end. And of course, since this is the end of an axon, these will be axon terminals. What is the role of the axon terminals? Well, pretty straightforward. Once the electrochemical signal makes it from the dendrite through the soma and down the length of the axon, again, under special circumstances that we'll talk about in the next part of this lecture, it runs into a terminal, an axon terminal. And inside that axon terminal is a series of important chemicals: sodium, potassium, and calcium. This sodium, potassium, and calcium undergo a variety of chemical reactions, causing these buttons to rupture and spill out their contents. You want to guess? I'm sure you already have guessed what these contents are. That's right. These contents are neurotransmitters or neurochemicals. Dopamine, or serotonin, or norepinephrine, or noradrenaline, or acetylcholine. It's not important at this point in the class for you to know all of the neurochemicals, nor is it important for you to know what all of these neurochemicals are responsible for. Suffice it to say, the axon terminal is responsible for releasing neurochemicals. Now, what's the role of a neurochemical, and why do axon terminals need to release them? Well, first, the role of a neurochemical. Neurochemicals, metaphorically, are like the letters of the alphabet. They can be arranged in a variety of combinations to create words or language. Now, they're not literal words or language that neurochemicals are creating, but instead metaphorical words. What I mean to say is, everything you think, everything you feel, all of your hopes, dreams, wishes, beliefs, everything that you ever have dreamt of is in large part the result of this cacophony of electrochemical activity, this buzzing and banging around of neurochemicals throughout the brain and the rest of the nervous system, which extends throughout the human body. These chemicals are going to find anywhere from 1,000 to 10,000 other brain cells on average with which to connect with which to influence, with which to make their impact. So this one brain cell here represents, again, 100 billion. And each of these 100 billion brain cells in your nervous system are hooked up, linked, interconnected with on average 1,000 to 10,000 others. Now, of course, like any type of interconnected network, this quickly becomes recursive. This quickly grows in size and scope, allowing for every part of your body and every part of your nervous system to sort of work together. Even though not every neuron is directly connected to every other neuron, or every neuron is not necessarily directly connected to every muscle or tissue, indirectly at least, everything is connected through this network of neurons. Now, I say the word connected, but this is extremely important. I say the word connected. I don't literally mean that brain cells connect to one another like line segments, where this brain cell here connects to this brain cell here through this direct network, and this brain cell connects to these two, and so on and so forth. This is fine if you want to picture this metaphorically, but the truth is not quite so simple and straightforward. The truth about neural communication is that this communication is based on non-linear contact. In other words, just because two brain cells are really close together doesn't mean they necessarily speak to each other directly. And just because two brain cells are really far apart doesn't mean that they only speak to each other indirectly. Some connections between any two brain cells are very short. They only cross micrometers in length, but yet some connections, again, can be as far as 6.5 feet tall, or however tall your body is. The other part I want to bring home is that not only are brain cells not necessarily linearly connected, they also technically never touch. That's right, brain cells really never actually touch one another. This despite all the talk about brain cells reaching out and connecting with one another. This despite all the talk about the interrelatedness, or again, the contacting of one brain cell with another. The truth is, something extremely unique in terms of the nervous system, and I dare say unique in the universe, happens. What is that? Well, let's take this right here and let's blow it up. Let's pretend right down here that we are going to blow up or examine at the even lower microscopic level the axon terminal, and also we're going to blow up one of these little endpoints on the dendrite. Right? One of these little receptors right here on the dendrite. We're going to blow it up right here. And the first thing you should notice about these two illustrations, whether it be the axon terminal or the dendritic receptor, is that they both look similar. At the microscopic level, they both look similar. If you hone in on these two sites, if you localize these two sites, they look very similar. When the terminal button or axon terminal releases the neurochemicals, these neurochemicals gravitate to, are attracted by, the receptors on the dendrites of other brain cells. And remember I said that each brain cell in your body is connected on average to 1,000 to 10,000 others. Imagine, if you will, that this one axon terminal representing one brain cell is potentially going to influence the behavior of 1,000 to 10,000 other brain cells. How does it do it? Because there are so many dendrites of different shapes and sizes and lengths that are hanging out nearby. These neurotransmitters will be attracted by the terminal receptors of other dendrites. That's right, sort of like a lock and key. These chemicals, maybe they're serotonin, and they are encouraging us to have a positive, pleasant mood, are going to be attracted by dendrites of other neurons that sort of traffic in mood elevating chemicals. So if this were a serotonin neuron with a serotonin axon terminal, and these green bubbles represent serotonin molecules, then 1 to 1,000 other neurons nearby or far away could be attracting these serotonin chemicals to keep the message of happiness, as it were, continuing to flow through your brain and nervous system. Now, I said they don't actually connect. What you should notice by now from the illustration on the screen is that there is space separating the axon terminal of one neuron, from the dendritic receptor of another. Understand that they don't actually touch. Instead, there is a small microscopic gap that separates the two. You've heard the name of this gap, I'm sure. Sometimes you've heard it used incorrectly, but this gap is called a synapse. It represents a physical space between any two neurons, specifically between the terminal buttons of one and the dendritic receptors of another. If there's 100 billion neurons in the brain, there's about 100 trillion synapses in the brain. And if you want to scale that up even further so that you can truly appreciate how this cacophony or this pharmacy of swirling neurochemicals in your nervous system could really be responsible for and give rise to all the human thoughts, feelings, and behaviors across this universe, it has been estimated the number of possible permutations, commands, is greater than the number of elementary particles in this entire universe. Now, that's all I have for today. I want you to ponder both the enormity of the brain cell and its potential for communicating, and also I want you to ponder the simplicity of it.